Hello, I am Florence Murray Clark. I was born Florence Murray in New York, New York in the year of 1900. So I am actually a native New Yorker who decided with me and my husband, Edward Pullman Clark, to build our lives here in this great town of Lincoln, in our two towns that we consider are both of ours, the Lincoln-Woodstock community. I grew up in a very affluent family in New York, but really was not someone who liked the whole style of debutante balls and things of that nature. I more really had wanted to truly experience life and adventure, and I just did not fit the mold for New York at all. So we did have a place on where you would see your avenues there, where it has like the Fifth Avenue and that, and our family did do real estate as well, so we had those and came from a family who was the first government shipping contractors in America, although the Vanderbilts would say they were the second, or the Rockefellers, one of them, we were either the first or the second, and we would say first. And so we were a long line of shipping industry, government shipping contractors. Later, it would come to be, of course, that both my boys were in the Navy, Merchant Marines as well. So I decided that I wanted to really do something different, and we had my main place in Mamaroneck, New York, where across the way, just like a field from there to there, his house was Edward Pullman Clark, and I could shine my flashlight in his room and him in mine. And he was older, and so my parents didn't really approve of that, and I still decided that he would be a great person to start my life with. And he was a young he was getting furs from Labrador at the time, and his family was also big into the fur industry in New York. So his family, the Clark family, was doing furs in New York since the 1800s, and still today do still sell them over there at the ranch. Of course, smaller ones. And he was going back and forth getting the finest furs in New York, and really had started to have a strong affinity for the Eskimo sled dog, and had thought that it would really be wonderful if the breed was in America. I now know that many of you will call these huskies and whatnot, and have probably seen what you think might be one. But back then, there wasn't these types of dogs, and it would come to be that my husband, we would get married, and he would bring back by ship these dogs. When we got married, we started our first dog ranch in Milan, New Hampshire. Well, Milan, New Hampshire was not the place for tourists to come to have sled dog rides, let alone to come and look at our dogs that we were breeding. So that was a truly failed attempt, and no one came, and I was very distraught that maybe my dream wouldn't happen. And my family kept saying, if you come back to New York, we'll have all these things for you and lots of big offers. And I just was very adamant that I would make it here. And we were driving through the Notch and just trying to think of what we can do with this completely failed business attempt. And this was, of course, in the 20s, when we came upon the Old Man of the Mountain. And upon seeing the Old Man of the Mountain, I said, Ed, stop the car. This is it. This is the place. And he says, I said, I want to buy this land. And he said, I don't know if this is for sale or anything. And there was a state highway worker and said, oh, sir, is this land for sale? He gave a strange look. Oh, no, ma'am, this is owned by the state of New Hampshire. So I could not buy the Old Man of the Mountain. So the next best thing was, of course, come down the road to the closest farm for sale, and that would be the farm right across the river here. And it would come to be, of course, what is now Clark's Trading Post and the White Mountain Central Railroad. And that farm that I would say, this would be great. People can come through here and maybe there will be a chance at some business here. And so it would end up being, of course, where what would be home for me forever, as I chose to be buried here in what I decided to make a home, where my husband Edward, to be stubborn, he had to be buried in Mamaroneck, New York. So we don't get to see him today because he's there and I'm here. We are miles apart. So, and I think most women are miles apart with their husbands, probably, I assume, anyways. So I ended up, now it's actually quite interesting because over there, this farm they had, of course, we have Tuttle's rustic house, which is, a little change today with Tuttle's, but the Tuttle family, they had Tuttle's Tavern over there for, bless you, for many generations. And actually, to the best of my knowledge, the Tuttle family, because we're on the 5th generation of the Clark family in our business, more Tuttles were there for generations than even the Clark family is now. So Tuttle's Tavern there for a very long time and many generations, and I'm sure still Tuttle's in this area today, yes. So, and very interesting, and just started to, you're dipping your foot in business and things are not like they are in the city type life, and you try to adapt and you're meeting new people, and me being very headstrong, not really many of them had seen a woman like that before, and nobody, like I was saying before, I never was one of the rah-rah type feminist people, but of course believed that I didn't need a sign to showcase what I truly was. I was that. I didn't have to advertise that. And I wore the pants, which my sons, Murray and Ed, would get mocked for, that your mother wears pants. But I was out there working, and hard work is just the basis of everything. And I think that it is truly in the Yankee fabric to be hard workers and do something that means something. I would then be, of course, with the sled dogs, going into the sled dog races and truly annihilating the competition, men from all over the world, and winning, the first woman to win and win and win again. And these men, that was back then, that would be like, a major sport back then. That would be like the big time. That would be truly back then like what would be like a football game on TV, because these people are coming from Sweden and Norway, and these are the best of the best. And I absolutely crushed the competition and would end up, doing very, very well. And my husband was a very, very unbelievable runner, truly athletic, ran for Vermont. And he taught me something that most people don't know, which is the reason I won the most was because most people would be lazy on the sled like this and let the dogs do the work. But what I would do is that whole time in the woods is I would sprint behind the sled so the dogs didn't have to do anything. And that was how I won. And I love the dogs, although I first wasn't taken to them, but I just loved them and the breed. And of course we would end up, working with the military to bring those dogs over to win World War II on secret missions for both my sons. And my son Murray, of course, would have the family lore as the youngest issued military passport ever at age 15 for military service of his secret mission, which he got pulled out of school for and nobody knew for quite some time because of, the Hitler trying to kill us all. So, but anyways, we would win that war, and they both did great things. And when it comes down to Mount Washington, being the first woman to climb Mount Washington with sled dog, it of course is probably what many would say would be my greatest feat, which was encouraged by Joe Dodge, who was in charge of the Appalachian Mountain Club, who decided to make a very snide comment when I was up there trying to help the Dartmouth boys' bodies that had been frozen up there to death in grotesque and crippling conditions because of how cold Mount Washington is, and they were frozen like statues, and I wanted to help because they couldn't get the boys out. Whereupon he said to my husband with a mean look and said that no woman ever belongs on a mountain in a place like this, and I am so insulted you would bring her here. And it would be in that same year that after a few failed attempts because of me enduring during those attempts what would be considered on the Category X hurricane wind speeds of Mount Washington, after going over Mount Washington and having to hike back up with my axe and everything and making up, many times almost failing and dying up there, that I would finally make it up to be the first woman to climb Mount Washington with sled dogs and do that. And Joe Dodge certainly inspired that, because today there are many women who enjoy the mountains, and I think that they're really for all. I think that God created them probably for everyone to enjoy, and I would end up dying from that because my lungs would freeze from it, which would give me tuberculosis, and I would die at the age of 50 in the sanitarium. But I always said that we do not do what we're doing now for us. We do it for the generations that come after us so that they can have something. And that would really be encompassed by the fact that I can look across the river and hear across the river that my children and great-grandchildren are 5 generations of our business, which is now Clark's Trading Post and the White Mountain Central Railroad. And that's why I did all this, and that's why I made this my home.